Hi there, I'm Stephen Fong, and welcome back. Starting from this tutorial, I will talk about the properties for flex items. Previously, we were focusing on properties of flex containers, and now, finally, we're approaching the end of this series. The next tutorial will be the end of the tutorial series. I'm thinking about uploading different use cases of Flexbox with source code to the series in the future, so that you guys can see how your knowledge of Flexbox properties can be applied in the real world. Alright, now let's jump into today's content. By default, flex items in a container appear in the order they appear in the source code. However, we can use the order property to control the order in which the items appears in the container. Now, if we look at the HTML file, all the items are arranged in order. If we go to the CSS file and give item2 an order attribute with the value of 1, okay, order and 1. Save it and switch back to the browser and refresh. You can see now item2 resides at the end of the main axis. That's because all items by default have order 0. If we set an item to a higher order, it will be placed at a higher position. And if you specify the same order for multiple items, they will be ordered based on their position in the source code. For example, let's switch back to the CSS file and let's say give item 5 an order of 1 as well, and save it and switch back to the browser and refresh. You can see item 2 will be placed after item 5 will be placed after item 2, because that's how it works in the source code. The next property is flex grow. This property describes the ability for the item to grow if necessary. It dictates what amount of extra space inside the flex container the item should take up, relative to other items in the container. It may sound a little bit complicated, but no worry. You will get it soon. Let's demonstrate this now. By default, you can see items only take up space that are necessary to fit the content. In this case, the text. Sometimes you don't want to see this empty space, but instead you want the items to grow and take up this extra space. So for example, when I extend the width of the browser, you can see this empty space increase, and sometimes you want the items to grow so that it can consume this extra space. By default, a flex item has flex grow equals to 0, which means it doesn't grow. Let's try this out. Firstly, let's set item 1 to 0. Flex grow. Save it and change to the browser and refresh. You can see there's no effect. However, if we set it to 1, the item will take up all the extra space here. So let's switch back to the CSS file and change it to 1. Save it and let's refresh in the browser. Now it grows. If there are more than 1 items with this property set to 1, they will share the extra space evenly. For example, if we also set item 3 to 1, item 1 and 3 will now evenly consume the extra space. That is, suppose there are 100 extra pixels. Item 1 and 3 will grow for 50 more pixels. Let me show it to you. Say, let's copy this one and paste it to item 3. Ctrl C and switch back to the browser, and refresh. Can see they now consume same amount of extra space. However, if we set item 3 with this property set to 2, it will gain 2 times more space than item 1, which has this property set to 1. For example, if item 1 grows by 10 pixels, then item 3 will grow by 20 pixels. Let me show you. Control C and go back to the browser. Refresh. Now you can see item 3 grows more. Now pause the video and think about the following questions. What do we do if we want all the items to take the extra space evenly? Are you ready for the answer? Yes, we can just add FlexScroll equals to 1 in the flex item class. That is FlexScroll equals to 1. But remember, we need to delete this line. And let's go back to the browser and refresh. That's it. Another thing to keep in mind is for this property, you could even specify decimal numbers, but do not specify negative numbers. It will not work. The next property is Flexshrink. As you may guess from its name, it describes the ability for the item to shrink if necessary. Now, first of all, we are gonna delete the previous properties that we have added so that we can demonstrate each property separately. Let's see, and this one, also item 2, and item 5. I think that's all, and save it, refresh the browser. Now let's go back to the editor and add this Flexshrink property to flex item class. Now remember, the default value of Flexshrink is 1. When you are decreasing the width of the browser, you can see items are shrinking, and up to a point they just overflow. Let's set it to 1 and save it, go back to the browser. Let me demonstrate this to you. Now, because the default value is 1, you can see the item's width is starting to decrease. That's called shrinking. And up to a point, it just get overflow. To disable shrinking, we can set its value to 0. Now let's go to the CSS file and change it to 0. Save it and go to the browser and refresh. Now you can see no matter how I decrease or increase its width, the item doesn't move. It won't shrink. Flexshrink's value works in a similar way as FlexScroll. The value describes the item's shrink rate relative to other items in the container. So for example, if one of the items with this property set to 5, it's gonna shrink 5 times as much compared to other items with a value of 1. So for example, other items shrink 10 pixels. This item is gonna shrink 50 pixels. Let's demonstrate this with the UI. Let's switch to the CSS file and let's say for item 4, let's set Flexshrink to 5, and also don't forget to delete the Flexshrink on flex item class so that we can see the shrinking effect. Also, for demonstration purpose, we are gonna give each flex item a larger width, say 20 RAM, Control S, and let's switch to the browser, increase its width, and refresh. Now you can see item 4 shrink much faster than other items. Actually, I think I can adjust the size, the width of each item to be smaller so that we can see it better. Okay, now refresh. Now you can see item 4 shrink much faster than other items. To conclude, Flexshrink dictates the shrink factor of the flex items. When the default size of flex items is larger than the flex container. Next, we will talk about flex bases. It specifies the initial main size of the flex item before the extra space in the container is distributed. Now, just a reminder, main size equals to the size between main start and main end. Before we reintroduce flex bases, we were using the width property to control flex items width because we haven't introduced this property yet. But from now on, we should never use width to set the width of flex items again. Instead, we use flex bases. The default value of flex bases is auto, which set the width based on the item content. If we set the flex basis of item 2 to 200 pixels, now let's try this out. For item 2, flex basis to 200 pixels. And also don't forget to delete other extra properties that we just added. Okay, now go back to the browser and refresh. You can see space width increase accordingly. You can also use pixels or percentages or different other relative units. But one thing to keep in mind, flex grow and shrink are independent on flex bases. For example, if you set flex grow to 1, the extra space will be added on top of the 200 pixels given to item 2. So for example, if I set the flex grow of item 2 to 1, the total width of item 2 now will be this width plus the width of this extra space. The last property we're going to talk about is the flex property. Basically, it's just the shorthand of flex grow, shrink, and basis. And by default, flex property has the value of 0, 1, and auto, just like the default value for those properties. So, let me show you. Flex 0, 1, and auto. That's the default value. And each of them correspond to, for the first argument is flex grow, and the second one is Flexshrink, and the third one is basis. You don't need to remember that. You can just search it online when you want to use this flex. Always use flex if you can. It's a better practice. So thank you for watching this tutorial. If anyone has any questions about what I have explained in this video, feel free to ask in the comment section. I will do my best to answer those. And if you like this video and would like to support that, the easiest way is to like this video and follow my channel. Also, share this video to anyone who might find it useful. I will see you in the next tutorial.